All right, hey guys. Today we're going to talk a little bit about water and sports drinks and how we might be able to use them to optimize our performance and to prevent our death. Because, yes, that is possible. This lecture is brought to you by the letter M and mozzarella cheese specifically. So, shout out to those sponsors. Okay, so a brief introduction to water and some of the big ticket information that you want to know right off the bat. Water is one of the most important ergogenic aids in sport because becoming dehydrated is one of the quickest ways to start losing performance, and it has some of the most magnitude, meaning like you could not quite have enough food, you could be kind of cramping a little bit, maybe you didn't do an appropriate warm up. Those will not hurt your performance as much as if you become acutely dehydrated. Your performance will plummet quickly. Dehydration can also cause serious heat-related illnesses that can lead to death or potentially even worse, losing at your sport event. And we all know that once you're up to the pearly gates trying to get into heaven, God's specifically going to look at how you performed in your sports, and that's going to dictate whether or not you get into heaven. I may or may not be kidding. Okay, so some of the ways we can tell if we're hydrated or dehydrated, we'll kind of outline those here. So the gold standard is called urine specific gravity, which is a specific test that you can put into your urine in a cup, and it measures the concentration of urine to water. When that gravity is higher, it's going to show either your very levels of dehydrated, and it could potentially also show kidney issues there too. Some less effective methods, but they become more effective if you pick two or three. It's going to be urine color, urine volume, and body weight. So if your urine color is light to light lemonade, that's going to be a pretty good sign that you're hydrated pretty well. But it's not as effective as urine specific gravity. But then if our urine's a good color and there's a lot of it, that's a really good sign that you're hydrated. If your urine's a good color, there's a lot of it, and your body weight isn't dropping, that's a really, really, really good sign. So even though they're less effective, if you use them in conjunction with one another, you can get some really, really good data. A fourth less effective option is going to be thirst. And why I say thirst is a less effective option is because specifically diets like high in sodium and or exercise intensity, specifically high intensity exercise, can kind of give you false positives or negatives on thirst. So if you start sprinting right out of the gate, it's a little bit of a delayed thirst response, and then a diet high in sodium can cause an increased thirst response. So sometimes you see that when people are dieting and they start adding a lot of salt to their food to make it yummy because eating low calorie vegetables and stuff kind of sucks. So that increase in sodium sometimes causes an increase in fluid drinking and then water retention, and it's kind of a snowball, and you can retain some water weight there. So they're not. So thirst isn't exactly a perfect mechanism for thirst. It has some shortcomings, but it's not a useless tool, and you should definitely pay attention to it. So for performance related to aerobic work, it can take up to 8 hours to rehydrate after an aerobic session, especially if the volume was high or if it was intense. And as we mentioned previously, dehydration is going to be one of the most significant ways to decrease or maintain your performance in terms of nutrition and interventions. So, how you might want to hydrate prior to exercise is have zero point 0.1 ounces per pound of body weight 4 hours prior. So if you weigh 200 pounds, having a 20-ounce thing of water or Gatorade, things like that, prior to your exercise might be beneficial. Um, However, you want to add zero point 0.5 ounces to this if your urine is dark or there's not a lot of it. So kind of a throwback to our previous measurement there. Fruits are an awesome way to stay hydrated as well, and electrolytes in this scenario, especially if dehydrated, are advisable. During exercise, ad libitum, so meaning you could specifically drink as you're getting thirsty, those we mentioned previously, if the intensity is high. Um, Thirst responses can be delayed, so it might not be perfect. So more often than not, we'll recommend the second option, which would be 3 to 8 ounces of fluids with 6% carbs every 15 minutes or longer with exercise. So, or for longer with exercise rather. So it's important to have about 6% carbs in there specifically because you want to make sure that you're maintaining blood sugar. And then we'll get to electrolytes a little bit later, but you want to kind of have the appropriate ratios of things to make sure that energy is okay, and hydration is okay. Sports drinks do a really good job of this, having the appropriate amount of carbohydrates in them, but also having sodium, potassium, and various electrolytes that can be helpful for maintaining aerobic performance. And then after exercise, 24 ounces per pound lost, again with electrolytes. Hopefully, you're noticing a little bit of a theme here with how important electrolytes are, which we'll get into a little bit later. So, for power, strength, hypertrophy, and sport, dehydration also aggressively affects the performance in these. And overall, the fluid recommendations are largely very similar. The fluid intakes, specifically in like how many ounces you're drinking, might be different, but the mechanisms of measurement are still the same. So you're still looking at the three mechanisms we talked about: urine specific gravity, performance, things like that. And another point to note that general population might only need to use thirst and urine color to kind of guide their hydration. If they're missing any of those two markers, they might need to start looking at others and being a little bit more regimented with their hydration. But if they're drinking when thirsty and the urine color is good, that's often a really good place to start with Gen Pop. That way you don't get too neurotic about the minutia. So some hydration related problems. First off would be a performance decrease. And then as we get a little bit more serious, heat cramps. This is a moderate fluid or sodium loss. And then a little bit more serious heat exhaustion, which is significant fluid and sodium loss. Heat stroke, which is the inability to regulate your body temperature. This can sometimes lead to death. So again, we're getting more and more serious. And then most seriously of all would be a mire of self-disdain for missing that game-winning shot because you were dehydrated and you knew it, and you chose not to make sure you stay hydrated. So, and that stuff will haunt you long beyond the grave. So, looking at electrolytes, I kind of foreshadowed this a little bit earlier. The body keeps extracellular fluid in the body as well as intracellular fluid, and there's a cell wall in between them. And essentially, this relationship and ratio of fluids kind of dictates hydration, cellular function, and many other things that need to occur within the body. These two pools of fluid essentially have different electrolyte makeups, which dictate how they are able to transport across the cellular membrane. So, without adequate hydration in both of these and proper electrolytes, thinking, for instance, sodium, potassium, being able to operate the sodium potassium pump, you're not able to maintain the appropriate ratios of fluid and electrolytes internally and externally within the cell, thus not allowing that cell to exhibit the appropriate functions. So some ways that you can start to notice some issues would be acid-base balance of the blood pressure, performance. All of these things can't be properly regulated if you're not able to maintain both fluid balance but also electrolyte balance. So this is one of the reasons why you don't want to take in just water, because you do need to replace some of those electrolytes. You also don't want to take in, well, it's a little bit hard to do this, but like just electrolytes. Like if you have a high sodium diet, for instance, your body's going to increase your thirst response, hopefully increasing your fluid intake to kind of balance out those ratios, which is why sometimes you see, again, when someone's dieting and they're adding a lot of sodium because there's no calories in it to their food to make it tastier, fluid intake will go up to kind of make sure that that balance is maintained. Sports drinks, really awesome, have adequate dosage of key electrolytes, this being per 15 minute of exercise, anywhere between 460 to 690 milligrams of sodium, 75 to 195 milligrams of potassium, and a 6% carbohydrate, 6 to 8% carbohydrate solution. Again, this is to make sure that you're regulating blood sugar and that electrolyte balance with the fluids that you're taking in. Because again, cellular function can't be optimized if you're not getting the right ratios of these things. So, in conclusion, for general life, urine color and thirst is going to be able to adequately predict and monitor hydration for most people. For athletes, urine specific gravity is going to be the gold standard, or you could use two or more of the secondary measures we mentioned. Hydration is crucial for performance and and also safety. It has a very large effect on both. So don't slouch on hydration. It's one of the most important things that you can do. If you're doing vigorous exercise, ensure that electrolytes and carbohydrates are a part of your hydration strategy. And your hydration strategy should probably include pre, during, and post exercise considerations. Hopefully that helped. And hopefully you stay just a little bit more hydrated after this and hit that game winner so you don't have to deal with, again, the disdain of your peers. Have a great day, and hopefully you learned something.